Just do a better job.
And now they're going to have more experience. You know, the first time it was like a trial run. Now this time, the second time you got more experience. This time you know, and also deserve the graduation.
Yeah.
This way, hopefully maybe next time. Kind of hard to say.
That's what I'm talking. They're not waiting for you over there.
I didn't know that.
Practice.
How are you?
Yeah.
No, I had to take a mental break. I had on 3 straight days, and I just stayed home for 3 straight days. I didn't go anywhere.
Well, that's good.
Because I'm in class, and it's like I just needed a mental break.
Yeah. What do you say in class?
I'm doing secondary elementary.
Repair leaky dishwasher and toilet flushing. Fix broken oven. It's time to get your endless home to-do list done in real time.
Yeah.
Introducing Front Door, your new one-stop app for home repair and maintenance. Front Door lets you video chat home repair experts will quickly diagnose your problem.
I was gonna be right.
Yeah, but I just have to, I know
All you need to do is open the front door, download the app for free, and video
but I
chat
know
with
that I can
experts.
go.
Yeah.
You want to be on the front row?
I don't have a problem.
That's why I guess you have a question.
Either that or I'm blurring. I'm running over the glasses and not Thank you so much. That's the same look that we get in church. We go off on that.
Funny part is I was just thinking about the stuff I say when it does go off. I know. I'm so glad you did.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
It is so great to see so many people out tonight to talk about such an important topic. I'm Dr. Yonda Batts, and I will be the moderator for the evening. We have a wonderful panel here who I will introduce shortly. And we are really here to talk, just to talk about it, right? Mental health is something that's not new, right? It's been around, but I tell you, since COVID, since the pandemic, we've seen a lot more of a lot of things. And so part of tonight's discussion, which, Spring Creek Baptist Church and Chesterfield Alumnae Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta coming together to have this has just been it's just a wonderful thing. So hopefully everybody will take something away from here. And as the topic says, let's talk about it. It's not just us talking about it up here, it's all of us talking about it. Outside, there's a basket and people will be coming around with cards. If you have any questions, any thoughts that you have, please put them in there. We're going to talk about it. I will get them. If you're online, drop it in the chat and someone will be watching that as well and giving us the questions because we this is a great opportunity that we don't often have, right? To talk about the things that we want to talk about, ask questions that we want to ask. So we're going to take advantage of it. So next, you will hear from Dr. Kenneth Cooper, who's a senior pastor here, and followed by Michelle McQueen, who's the president of the Chesterfield Alumni Chapter of Health.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
We are excited and happy first for your being here. Your presence makes all the difference in the world. And of course, when you engage, it'll bring more clarity. We also are grateful and thankful that we are able to partner with the Delta Alumnae Chapter of Chesterfield. I think that it's important for collaboration to take place, particularly when it comes to mental health, mental wellness. And far too long, we've been pushing things to the side. And it's a shame for the church, particularly, to push such matters to the side, because as a people of God, it's our responsibility to see people as human beings made in the image of God. And far too long, sometimes society look at human beings with mental wellness issues. They look at them as the issue. We are far more than our issues. So it's my hope and my prayer that we'll continue on in such dialogue, that we will have an impact for information. So therefore, how we treat each other, we'll be more sensitive to each other. We'll be more aware of things that are taking place around each other. And the simple fact that society does play a big role in it. And we get to decide how we want to continue on playing that role. It's my goal and my objective for the church is to no longer be quiet about it, right? So from my perspective, preach about it, teach about it, and have conferences about it, and bring people together to have more conversations, particularly fraternities and sororities. It's just we're at a time and day where we have to come together as a people to help people strive and thrive, even with mental illness and with issues. We all got to thrive in our own issues, right? I'm not going to tell you mine, I don't want you to tell me yours. We all got to thrive in our issues, right? And it's just a shame that the church becomes quiet. So on my watch here at Spring Creek Baptist Church, I don't know about any other church. My watch here at Spring Creek Baptist Church is that we'll no longer be quiet. We'll play an active and participant role in making people aware and helping people feel welcome in God's house as human beings made in the image of God, in spite of everything else. So that means being advocates in policy, advocates as far as speaking up, whatever way we can to help our community to become better and learn how to deal with the various levels of mental wellness. It's going to be very important, particularly in the 21st century. So I just want to thank Delta Alumnae Chapter for this wonderful opportunity to host and to have conversations about it from a theological perspective, from a social perspective, from a psychological perspective. And I believe if we do all of that, we'll then pray and do, pray and do, pray and do, pray and do. Just prayer won't do. Pray and do. If we do that, I think there's a song. You pray for me, I pray for you. And we'll watch God change. So again, welcome, and we thank you. I open us up in prayer, and then I'm going to take my seat and participate like everyone else participate, as you'll have someone so much more beautiful than I am following you. Let us pray. Most gracious Saint Father, again, we just thank you for this opportunity. We thank you, oh God, because only you can do some things. We're just taking the first step. So we ask and we pray, God, that in this safe, sacred space, that persons feel comfortable to ask questions. Questions will be answered, and some questions can't be answered, that we'll have enough knowledge to direct. All we're saying is that we're here, open to your spirit. And we believe that if we're open to it, and with our work, and with praying, and in collaboration, that you would do all the others. So we thank you for the Chesterfield Delta Alumnae Chapter. We thank you for the panelists. We thank you for this space. As we do on Sundays, have your way. Any way that you bless us, we'll be satisfied. In Jesus Christ, we all say amen.
Amen.
Good evening. Thank you to each one of you for being here with us tonight during our Mental Health Awareness Month. I bring you greetings on behalf of the 200 members of the Chesterfield Alumnae chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. We are very pleased to partner with Spring Creek Baptist Church in welcoming you, and are so excited for you to share in learning and discussing about our topic this evening. Let's talk about it, conversations about mental health. As a community service organization, a part of our mission and life, as well as finding information about what to do or know where to go to find assistance in these situations. We are very fortunate to have speakers to you for your understanding and knowledge. The National Alliance on Mental Illness states Mental Health Awareness Month is an opportunity for all of us to come together and remember the inherent value we each hold, no matter our diagnosis, appearance, socioeconomic status, background, or ability. We thank you again for attending and hope that you take something away from this event that will be beneficial to you and your family. I now turn the program back over to our moderator, Dr. Yonda Banks.
Well, I don't know about you all, but I'm excited. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk about it. So often we think about mental health or as extreme. And the reality is that we all struggle. You know, we may not say it, but we all struggle. And it doesn't have a race, it doesn't have an economic status, it doesn't have any of that. But it's nice to know that we're not struggling alone, because sometimes we feel alone. Sometimes we wear these masks so much and for so long that sometimes we buy into our own mask. Other times we're afraid that people have an image of us. And gosh, if we take it down and say we're not okay, what is that going to say? It's going to say you're not okay. It's going to say you're human. It's going to say we all struggle. And so I think, again, this is a great opportunity for us to start talking about it and normalizing understanding, seeking support when you need it, and just growth. So with that said, I am going to introduce our panelists. In the center, we have Dr. Cedric McCall, who is an associate tenured professor of psychology at Virginia State University and CEO and owner of McCall Professional Counseling Services. Dr. McCall has a BA in psychology, an MA in counseling, and a doctorate of education in counseling psychology. Dr. McCall has worked as a juvenile psychologist and clinician for incarcerated youth and people with mental health illnesses. Dr. McCall has received many professional, athletic, and academic awards. Dr. McCall has over 50 publications, and he has co-authored a psychology textbook called The Introduction to Psychology, Guiding Young Minds. Dr. McCall has been in education, corrections, and mental health field for almost 30 years. He does research and interested in studying mental illnesses in the African American community and into the school to prison pipeline controversy. Finally, Dr. McCall is married to Dr. Shannon McCall, who's a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and they have 2 children, Cedric III and Madison. Dr. McCall. Next, we have Lauren Hirschler, who is the Substance Use Research Coordinator for Chesterfield County. She focuses on substance use in the county and with an emphasis on education, harm reduction, reducing stigma, improving the quality of life of people who use drugs, and helping people to connect with recovery and treatment resources. Welcome. And lastly, we have Major Brad Badgerow, who began in the Chesterfield County Police Department Basic Academy in January 1993. Been there for a while. And over the last 30 years, he's held 14 different jobs throughout the department. His current assignment is as a Uniform Operations Bureau Major, which includes patrol, K-9, traffic, and a few other specialty sections. He is a polygraph examiner and the mental health liaison for the police department. Outside of his work, he enjoys mountain biking in the Poconos and attending 80s band concerts. And he is a music buff. He has a music buff son. Excuse me. So this will be our panel for tonight. And as you notice, they are very diverse in their areas, but it all ties in, right? Because it's just not one part. Everything ties into our mental health and mental wellness. So again, thank you all. And so as I already stated, please, if you have any questions, you can drop them in the basket or just kind of raise your hand a little bit and Kimberly Conley and others will come around and get your question. Because this really is about all of us, right? It's just not a presentation up here. We really want to talk about it. So I'm just going to start, if we don't have any other questions, with my first question. I'm going to have a seat. So when we stop and we think about, the increase in mental health issues that we've seen since following the pandemic, right? Because again, a lot of things were happening, but we've seen lots of other things increase since the pandemic. What has been what you consider the pulse on the community? What are you all seeing? And we can start with whoever wants to start.
It's tough when you say whoever wants to start. It's tough. I don't mind starting because I tell my students at Virginia State, I always tell them a closed mouth don't get fed. And so I encourage them to speak up. And that kind of parallels and correlate with the things that's going on in the community since the pandemic. That a lot of people, they begin to stay to themselves. A lot of us was afraid. I was afraid. And I joked about it. I said, I didn't even want to check the mailbox. I was so scared, so I didn't know about the unknown, and I think it forced us to be together and it forced people to deal with their issues. And I tell people it was a good or bad thing. When you was at home, either you found out you really didn't like that person or you found out you really did love that person. And I think that unknown, it elicited a lot of feelings in a lot of individuals that they didn't know they had. And they begin to manifest, the depression, increase in suicide ideation and thought. And I think people began to understand that it was okay to express themselves. And I think that the community, and I think that mental health became very encouraging and supportive. And I think that people begin to understand that mental health is real. It's just like physiological health. See a broken bone, you can fix it. But a lot of times people can't see what's going on in you internally, psychologically. And they don't know what to do, and so I think now that it's kind of now everybody is kind of talking about it. And I think that everybody understands that it's okay not to be okay so that you can become okay.
I think one of the things for me that's kind of stuck out over the last couple of years is that we all had stuff going on. And COVID came along and acted as an amplifier and an accelerator, right? All this stuff was brewing. We weren't talking enough about mental health. We were slowly becoming more and more isolated, and then we got forced into isolation, right? We've gotten ourselves down to our phones and our electronics, and that's how we keep in contact with people. And then we were really forced into those boxes, right? So I think, as we kind of think about moving forward, I think the doctor's right. I think we have to talk more about it. We have to talk openly about it. We have to let go of that stigma, because the thing is, what we need the most is each other, right? And I think that became very, very apparent during the pandemic.
So I've been the mental health liaison for the police department for about a dozen years now in different roles. About 10 years ago, we rolled out our crisis intervention training, if people are familiar with that. And one of the goals of that is to educate any number of folks that come in for the training, but to work on, I've heard it a couple times already, taking away some of the stigma that comes with the idea of mental illness, right? And I can tell you, I've got all kinds of stats and things like that for anybody who wants to know them. But during COVID, things reduced in a lot of ways for us. Crime went down because people were stuck in, right? Calls for service went down some. But I can tell you that over the years from COVID and on, the reports we take for mental health related issues have grown exponentially, over 70%. in a couple of years' time. So what is that saying? Is that saying that there are more folks out there who are suffering from mental illness? Not necessarily, but I think one of the things that we may have done in some of our education and like Dr. McCall was talking about, admitting that it's okay to not be okay, to be okay, right? If we're doing a good job of that, then we're going to see more of it, right? We're going to see more folks who are okay with saying, yeah, I need some help. Now, the full-blown crisis and things like that the police side have to get involved with, might be a little different than that, but it also could be manifested from some of that. So my point of saying is, I think we're on the right track of letting people understand that it's okay to admit that they have some issues and they need some help. But it has become, now I'll end with this statistic. We are getting ready to start implementing a co-responding team. So when somebody calls and said they're having a problem, when we would normally just send a police officer, we're going to send a police officer and a crisis clinician together, so that what we can try to do is minimize the amount of people that we need to take into emergency custody. I'm glad to speak about that if anybody has any questions. But over the last 6 months, police officers have sat with people who are in mental health crisis, mostly at hospital ERs, for over 8,000 hours in 6 months' time, right? And if you play that out, you and I, when we go to work 40 hours a week, right? That's about 2,080 hours in a year. So in 6 months' time, we've spent 4 full-time people for an entire year. The only thing that they've done is sat with somebody who's having a mental health crisis, right? So my point is saying that is huge. That number is big, and we need to do something about that. But what we can do is things like this, having discussions, understanding what resources are available, and having the discussion. Let's talk about it, right? That's what we're here to do. So I want you to know, and I'll stop with this. I know I said I was going to stop. That your police department is dedicated to doing a number of different things, but we have 4 Ps: preserving human life, protecting the vulnerable, problem-solving partnerships, and mental health is all 3 of those things. And we are committed to walking alongside you and working with you in any regard in that line. Know that we care, and something like you said, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. That's very real, right? And so if we don't hear from you from the PD side of things, then we can't establish that partnership. So, okay, I'm done now. But any questions on notice line, I'm glad to answer, but we'll continue the question moderation. But I want to thank you for having us here at the table. It's important. Thanks.
Thank you all. And as you all mentioned, really, really important points. Just the isolation that we all experienced during this pandemic, amplification of what was already there, right? And then I think it's really powerful that there was a decrease in calls to police, right? Because for me in practice, I had an increase, right, where I couldn't get everybody in. And so what was really, I think was really good about that is, I think a lot of the calls weren't coming because people were afraid to go out, right? So they went to the resources of probably where they could have been going or should have been going in the first place in regards to those kind of struggles. And I just wonder, what are your feelings on that as far as, now with the pandemic, mental health professionals were being called more, and they could be involved in places that maybe the police department didn't have to be involved in. And so do you think that's helped with the partnership at all when it's kind of shifting to where those issues need to be?
I think it's kind of hard to figure out why we weren't getting the calls necessarily. But to me, the important piece is, okay, if now we are getting the calls, why is that? And what are we doing with that, right? And, we are seeing more folks that we need to take into emergency custody. That's a partnership between what we work with our CSB, our Community Services Board, and our crisis teams. It's not like we just say, okay, you're coming with us. But I guess my point in that is I'm glad that they're calling. I'm glad that people are looking for help. Now, what we're trying to do is put things in place where we can maybe offer some resources and maybe have people call other places besides calling the police when they don't need to, because it's just not a good system all the way around. We do the best we can with what we got, but it's good that people are calling now. It's not giving people the help that they need, and that would be to your side of it, right? Referring to resources like your practice.
As far as resources, when you think about the families and how people are handling mental health issues, in substances, directed to you, the substance and the mental health high, have you seen changes with that as of late?
Yeah, I think early on in the pandemic, there was even a lot of people just joking about how they were going to sort of just drink their way through it, right? There was a lot of popular culture with, well, we'll just stay at home and drink wine. And I think there was a lot of soothing with that, right? Isolation is not great for folks in recovery. It's not great for folks with mental health struggles. And when folks feel uncomfortable, we try to soothe ourselves, right? We don't like to be uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. And we will reach to the things that are available to us that we know will make us feel better. And for some people during the pandemic, it was drugs or alcohol, whether that was a new starting of use or whether it was a return to something, right? If we have better tools, we'll reach for better tools. We know that, right? If we have community, we'll reach for community. But folks who were isolated and didn't feel like they had a lot of choices, we're reaching for that. We saw an exponential shift during the pandemic. Now, starting before the pandemic, not the deaths that happened during the pandemic due to drug overdoses were not all related to the pandemic. Prior to 2020, we were already starting to see a shift in the drug supply away from heroin and towards fentanyl, and that fentanyl contaminates not just things that people think are heroin, but many other things like powder and crack cocaine, pressed pills, so pills that look like they're legitimate but they're counterfeit. So it was really kind of a perfect storm of things that happened, right? But even thinking about this mental health, when we think about mental health, if we can reach somebody before they get to an acute crisis moment, that's where we want to get folks, right? When you see somebody struggling, that's when you want to say, hey, how are you? You don't want to wait till they're very, very, very ill, right? Anything that we can do to intervene in somebody's drug use, alcohol use, mental health issue earlier, we get better outcomes for everybody. And we do that by, checking on each other.
No. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. So as you're talking about just kind of being isolated and what that really did, one of the things that we saw is that people who had social anxiety actually did better in the pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. Because they didn't have to be around a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So for a while, they were just, this is good.
We were flourishing.
You're right. Flourishing. And people were very social. There was an increase in depression, other struggles, right? And so, when you look at that and then suddenly the world opens back up, what we found, and this is really very to you, Dr. McCall, is that people had social skills struggles, right? That maybe we didn't see as much social, people not really knowing how to talk face to face. Everybody had kind of gotten used to talking on a screen, right? And what that looked like. And then kind of getting back out and having to deal with nonverbals, having to deal with being afraid to be around people, kind of because COVID was still happening, but at the same time, I'm a little awkward. I don't really know. And you had a group of teens who actually missed that period of development where they were, learning how to interact with people. So with that said, how is that? How are you seeing that kind of play itself out now with the social awkwardness, if you will?
Yeah, I think it's definitely tough. You had, especially I thought about my daughter was in kindergarten, and that is the time when you really get your social and emotional development, because I can't emulate a school in my home, so I can't emulate a cafeteria, all those things. So the next year when they went to school, they're kind of behind. So they really didn't know how to interact. So a lot of those kids, they had a lot of things internalized. So my daughter, she's not the only child. I got a 24-year-old and a 7-year-old, so it's a split. But when she went back to school, she kind of lost her mind, you know. So she was hyper and she was ready to engage and interact, but she didn't have those appropriate social skills because they lost them. And just kind of jumping ahead, I think about some of the students, let's say high school, and they finished high school online, and then they started college online. And then when it was time to come back to school, I say this is the generation of, they kind of blamed everybody else, you know, whereas the generation prior to that, I joke about, they used to bargain, you know, so they would come in my classroom and they would say, Dr. McCall, is there anything I can do, anything I can do? And the generation that didn't have the social skills, they didn't know how to interact, they didn't know how to bargain, so they blamed. It was everybody else's fault but theirs. So it became frustrating for us as educators. It became frustrating for us as mental health professionals because we had to realize that they didn't have those social skills and they didn't have those important, critical social skills. The transition from getting to kindergarten, the transition from high school to college, and then when you get to college, you learn a lot of things. And as we talked about earlier, there's a lot of introverted people, and they were comfortable with it, you know. And you got people like myself that's extroverted. I don't meet strangers. You see me around, and you think I know everybody in the room and stuff like that. So it was killing me, you know. That I had to walk around, but then I was scared somebody called 3 houses down. I ain't know what to do, you know. So it's just been tough. You know, it's been tough for a lot of people. But I think now, with people just getting out there and learning to interact, learning to talk, learning to share things, learning to say hello, learning to just talk to people, engage, interact with family, you know, things like that. I think that it can be a better situation for those as far as their social interactions.
That brings you to, like you said, starting to have those social interactions. During this time, also, there's been an increase in social media, right? That wasn't new. That was always there. But of course, when you can't see anybody, and I think we're in a TikTok generation, so to speak, like everybody's just kind of really engaged in social media. Do you see any way, or do you have any thoughts about the amount of time that people are spending now with social media? And that didn't really change once the restrictions, everything was lifted. That's still really, really, really big. So have we seen any difficulties as you see them?
I think social media can be scary because there's a lot of information out there that's not true. But there's a lot of people that believe the propaganda that's out there. So they're getting misinformation. You know, even about COVID, people was getting misinformation. About mental health, people get misinformation. So you got to educate yourself, you know, and you got to be around people in a support group that can help you. You know, so social media, as we all know, it can be good and it can be bad. And I mean, it's the age that we live in right now, right? My daughter can take my phone and do stuff that I can't do. It's the age that we live in right now. So, you know, I think as far as children, we have to monitor, you know, what they do with social media. I think we try to protect them a lot. And I think sometimes you got to let them interact and engage in that social media because that's a part of the platform, even within the school system. You know, you have to use those things now. So I think you just have to monitor them, supervise them, and make sure that they're okay. Be hyper vigilant about things that they're doing. And you know, that's my phone, that's my computer. So, you know, I'm gonna be on it when my 7-year-old daughter is on it. Because I see, even with her, I see grown men like her stuff, you know, and she's 7, you know. So you gotta monitor and make sure it's okay that no one tries to slip in there and talk to her and things like that. So again, social media can be good. I look at YouTube all the time and learn things. So it could be good and it could be bad for some people.
Ooh, social media. Yeah, you know, so I think one of the things that we have to kind of acknowledge is that it develops so fast and it comes at us so fast. And a lot of times what's being given to us is not necessarily what we want, right? And so for me, it's just always about the balance of preparation and protection. We can't overprotect, right? We don't want to overprotect our kids because then they get out there and they're underprepared. don't want to we don't want to expose them to too much too fast. So it's about finding that balance as parents, like what's going to be acceptable, and then teaching them how to be skeptical, teaching them how to curate that experience, right? You get to, if you can do a few things on here, you can decide what's coming at you. You'll have a little more control over what else comes at you, right? We got to make sure their kids are being radicalized in some way. We got to make sure that they are able to be skeptical of things. They can go and find the fact checkers that they know what that means, right? It's all about that balance of preparation and protection. And that's hard to talk about that with parents with drug use too, right? We overprotect, they're underprepared, and then they hit the real world and whoo, they're in trouble, right? Because they don't have that skill set. So all of those like ongoing, continuing conversations at their appropriate level. What's right for a 7-year-old is totally different than what I'm talking about with my 22-year-old, right? So we're in the same boat. I got 3 little kids down the hallway that I've got to figure out how to get them safe on there, and then I've got a 22-year-old that I'm still checking these. Hey, how much screen time do you have today? Talk to friends, go to work, nothing's good. It's all ongoing.
I one other question about social media is realizing that behind the screen, people can say anything, right? Behind the screen, people would say things they would rarely have said to someone face to face. And so just kind of speaking to that a little bit, like even with substance use, I mean, they're telling each other things that they can do with these drugs, whether they're true or not, or just being mean. Somebody saying, I need help, I need support. Because now you have a wide audience if you need help, and people will ask, and you may have some people trying to help, and other people may say, go and kill yourself. And we've had that, and that's really cool, but it's behind the screen. So with that piece, I mean, have you seen an increase with more severe things that are kind of happening with the social media part of it too, at all, or calls regarding that?
Yeah, I would say that's that when you talk about that balance, it's tough because, if you got a person that's going through a crisis and, they just seeing the mean things, that could, exacerbate them going into the crisis or hurting themselves and things like that. So it's really tough, that social media, that piece is, I really don't have that answer. You know what I'm saying? Like, you really got to have that balance. You really got to be hyper vigilant on, especially children, what they're watching, what they're doing to make sure that they're okay. Because we know the kids are bullies now, kids are cruel. And a lot of times when kids are hurting, they want to hurt others. So we say hurt people, and it's true, especially with children. You got a lot of children that's jealous, and so they're gonna say mean things, and they can get away with it on social media. And one of the flip things that I would say is that it's kind of changing a little bit, the platform of social media, or kind of telehealth with counseling and stuff like that too. It can be beneficial for those who don't want to, come out. But those who don't want to sit in office and share their feelings. So it's some benefits to that social media platform.
I think on the flip side, think about your social media presence. Are you showing all just the best parts, right? So when people look at that, they only see your best moments. And so you might be sitting next to somebody, you see their Facebook or their Instagram, and everything looks fantastic. So you're not going to ask them if they're okay, right? They're showing you only their best self, and at home they could be struggling, right? So it's important for us to take everything with a grain of salt, still be checking on folks, and still be asking folks if they're okay, even if that curated experience that they're giving you, that they're serving is great, right? How are you? But how are you for real? Who knows? Like, I can post a picture of me with my kids at the park and everything looks great. Well, I barked at them like 5 minutes ago because they were all fighting over that last French fry, or their skin was touching each other, right? We only are serving like this perfect vision of ourselves on social media, and that adds to the pressure. Well, I can't talk to Dr. McCall about this. I mean, look, everything in his life's going great. He doesn't want to hear about myself. No, he's got struggles too. There's probably overlap in our struggles, right? We're not talking about it. We don't know. We just see that everything looks great. Look, he's at Disney World. He's great.
Nobody knows how many takes it took to take pictures of children, right?
Right.
Skis and crying, this and that. You only get one good shot after that hour.
Yeah. It's not reality. We gotta have to keep reminding
That's the one
ourselves
you
that
post.
it's not reality. That's, you don't post the one where they're all fighting. You post the one where you got that 1 second of bliss.
Exactly. And so that brings up, we know we're shifting gears some, but that brings up a good point of the art of checking in. Right?
Yeah.
So the question becomes, who do we check in on? Who should we check in on?
Everyone. It should be like universal precautions. If you've ever had a job where they're like, there's a blood spill, go get your gloves. We do this, we treat it the same way. Every single person comes through the door. Universal precautions for mental health. Everyone gets checked in on. Should you be checking, are there risk factors? Oh yeah, for sure. If you know somebody's living alone, you should be checking on them more. Something big happened to them in their lives recently, right? A job shift, a move, a death, birth, any of those things, right? Big things in our lives, we want to check in. But for me, it's, and I'm going to defer to the doctor, right? But for me, it's universal precaution. We check on everybody, even the ones who look like they got it all together.
I actually would concur with that, because you never know. It's kind of what you said earlier. People are going to present the front stage, but you don't know what's going on in the backstage. And so, I had a young man I dealt with today, and I was thinking about it. And he's 17 years old, and he had a best friend kill himself. Within 6 months, he had his best friend kill himself. One got shot. His grandmother died of cancer. His father was walking the dog, and then decided, he took a drive, and he got killed in a car accident. And then another friend got killed. And I'm like, he's 17. I couldn't even deal with that stuff, And it's just so much stuff that people are dealing with. So you never know what people are going through. And I joke with my students. I don't know if y'all ever heard people say, you don't know me like that, and sometimes you don't. You don't know a person like that. You don't know what they're really going through. So it doesn't hurt to be nice to people, because you never know when it's that person that, may hurt you. And then we defer to, 911 and put y'all in those positions, So, it's definitely tough. But check in. I think just check in on everybody.
Sudden changes, right? So somebody who's going to church all the time, and then they're not in the pew on Sunday, right? Somebody you see walking the dog all the time, all of a sudden they're not walking the dog anymore. So any kind of sudden changes of people that and their routine is messed up, that's another flag for me. But universal.
Something that you all might know is if you have an idea that somebody's struggling with something, or they're really having a hard time, and it's going down that way, and you have that relationship with them, let me just ask you, is it okay to say, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about killing yourself right now? Is that okay to ask?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. Some of us in the room probably said, oh, no, I would never ask that, because that's going to make them that's going to put the idea in their head. No. Okay, good. See, I heard that, right? Y'all know. So good. But that's something that, it's a healthy reminder to say, if you know somebody who's going through it, they will appreciate the fact that you have that relationship. And unless, you don't know me like that, okay, but at least you're trying. Yeah. But if you have that relationship, then at least and they can tell you, well, actually, yeah, I am. Okay, well, let's go do something about it, right? As opposed to, well, no, I'm not. I'm just not feeling right now. I really would like to talk to somebody, right? There's different things there. Sometimes that's hard when we're doing that with our loved ones. We don't want to know that answer sometimes, right? Like, it's easy for me as a cop to come in and just say, hey, are you doing this? Are you thinking about her? Right, because I don't have that relationship, right? I'm trying to get the relationship so that we can make sure everything's okay. But gosh, folks, like, you're talking to like, I have a 23-year-old son. Having a conversation with him about his mental health sometimes isn't the easiest thing to do. So, but you got to do that. That's what we're talking about. Talk about it, right? Oh, sorry, louder.
Okay.
I'll be louder.
And so when you talk about, talk to everybody about it, right? Ask those tough questions. What do you do when people say, well, I'm not the professional? I noticed something's a little off, and that we've all been knowing it. We've all been talking amongst ourselves, but nobody's going to go and approach, right? Because I'm not a police officer. I don't know what to say. I'm not a counselor. I don't know what to say. What do we tell those people who say, I wanted to say something, but I'm not the professional, so I didn't do anything?
No, that's like always when, in psychology, when we talk about the bystander effect. It's like everybody is gonna pass that person until one person stops and help that person, and then everybody kind of jumps in. But I would tell people now that you just have to talk to people now. And if you don't have the answers, then you can refer them to somebody, but you need to know kind of what's going on with them, and especially if it's someone close to you, you need to talk to them and just get them to the appropriate people that can get them the help that they need. And like we said, some people are introverted, some people are extroverted. I find it's kind of interesting. I find that even in Chesterfield where I'm at the Wawa, you see a lot of people, and you begin to talk to people, and you find out a lot about people. So I just think interacting, engaging, and caring, because that person that you may not help might hurt somebody that you love. So you never know when you can make a difference. So we got to start making differences.
Especially when people are holding things in. Somebody say, are you okay? Or even you can even call out, right, things that you see different about them. I noticed that you haven't been at the meeting lately. Even if you don't say, are you okay? Just kind of asking those questions of something you've observed that's different. But as you just mentioned, that person could potentially have some things going on that end up hurting someone, so to speak. That brings the question of, just an increase in, just wondering, when everybody was isolated, was there an increase in domestic violence at all that you all are aware of? I know it's always there, I just didn't know if I could research it.
That was a good question. So if you heard the question, was there an increase in domestic violence? And I can tell you that we have numbers, right? Our calls for service and arrests and things like that. From 16, 17, 18, 19 prior to the pandemic, and 2021, and now we have 22. We just got our 2022 numbers back a little while ago. The very quick answer is domestic violence reduced during the pandemic. That was a surprise to us, as law enforcement officials. We thought we were going to see an increase, but it didn't. But what I can tell you is, and I'm no sociologist, and I can't tell you why, but now that we're coming out of the pandemic, those numbers are coming right back up to where they were prior. I don't know why. I mean, y'all might have some thoughts or theories on it, but we really thought, oh man, here we go, because we didn't isolate. We were all out doing our thing, and if we got calls, we went, right. We thought we were really going to see more of the domestic calls for service. So that was a good thing, but I guess the downside of that is, it's coming right back up, and that is following the trends for everything else. The things that went down are largely coming back to kind of normalize, at least here in Chesterfield. Does that prompt any questions from anybody? Okay.
All right. Major Brad, thank you. Brad, you kind of talked about the system that's in place.
Yeah.
Right? With that everybody's kind of working together. So we're talking about the Marcus.
Marcus Alert?
Right? Yeah.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about that, or any changes that maybe happen?
Sure. So.
Everybody familiar with the Marcus Alert?
No.
Okay, so real briefly, Marcus David Peters was a gentleman that was suffering from a mental health issue on 95 in Richmond City. And the very, very short version is he was delusional, got hit by a car. He was doing like snow angels in the summertime on the road. A police officer responded, tried to help. That interaction did not go well at all. They tried tasing him, that didn't work. Mr. Peters continued to attack the officer. The officer ended up shooting and killing him. Terrible situation, no matter what way you look at it. As a result of that, in 2020, legislation went into place, and it's called the Marcus Alert. And that's an acronym, and it has words that it stands for. But bottom line is, the goal for Marcus Alert is for there to be a system in place so that first, police don't have to go to all calls for service that a lot of times now police are going to, okay? And the thought would be that sometimes just because a police officer shows up, that could escalate the person who is having a mental health issue, who may not be in full-blown crisis, but might kind of, here you go, right? And so the idea is to, in those instances, divert other resources, mobile crisis response, or maybe just some help on the phone, different things like that. And so again, in short, there's 4 levels of Marcus Alert. Level 1, the idea would be that the call center 988, which is the crisis line, national crisis line now, if you're familiar with that. 911, you get dispatch, right? You get emergency dispatch. 988, you get emergency crisis help, okay? So the idea is a level 1, 988 would handle that. It will get diverted more to somebody who just needs to talk to somebody, just needs to have someone kind of talk them through how they're feeling. A level 2 would probably be a mobile response. So somebody from the crisis team, somebody from the regional office, somebody from crisis CSB would go out and meet with the person and say, okay, here I am, what can we do to help you through whatever you're feeling, to help them, refer to resources, things like that. Level 3 would be a call that it's probably a good idea that police show up, but maybe not just alone. And we're talking about the co-responder team that I just mentioned. So we would roll a police officer, specially trained, with a crisis clinician to show up and say, okay, what do we got? What can we help with? What kind of resources can we bring to bear so that we don't have to take you into custody and de-escalate that situation? That's a level 3. If that co-responding team isn't available, then we have CIT trained officers who are specially trained in how to deal with people in crisis. It may not be a mental health crisis, but it's just crisis in general, and they can go respond. The level 4 would be your just, okay, business as usual, things are bad, you got to send fire and EMS to take care of that side of things, you got to send PD to take care of that. And then once the scene is stabilized, then we can see, okay, what kind of mental health needs do we have? What resources can we have to bear, things like that. Marcus Alert in general, last year, there were 5 departments across the Commonwealth that enacted their Marcus Alert protocols and their programming. In our region, Richmond City did that. Chesterfield is second. So this year, there are 5 more across the Commonwealth that are coming online, and we're coming in with that. So Richmond was first, Chesterfield is second. We can learn a little bit from what Richmond did well and some little hurdles that they went across. But so starting July 1 is when our Marcus Alert kind of kicks off a little bit. Yes, ma'am.
If you have the insight, can you talk about what has gone well so far, like what you all have seen that's been really promising, and then maybe what some of the hurdles are that you can anticipate extra training or additional resources may need to kind of.
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you. So the state has done a good job of setting up the agencies or the localities who are putting this in place with some resourcing. So I will tell you from a CIT standpoint, officers who are trained, our department is between 70 and 80% trained in crisis intervention, which is great. We have 550 police officers across the department, and CIT in general says if you can get between 10 and 20% of your force trained, then that's good. But we're up to between 70 and 80, so that's good. So first of all, the training piece, we continue that, and we have 6 trainings throughout the year. They're 40-hour trainings, so it's a big lift for our staff, but we are committed to doing that. I don't want to take too much time, but I will tell you that we have done a soft rollout of our co-responding team. So an officer riding with a crisis clinician. The very first one they went to, estranged husband and wife. Husband was having all kinds of issues. The crisis clinician was talking to the wife. The officer was trying to figure out what's going on with the husband. The husband jumps in the wife's car, steals her car, takes off up the street. the officer is sitting there with a clinician and the wife trying to figure out, okay, now what are we going to do? And about 2 minutes later, they get a call for a burglary in progress. So this guy just drove up to Nash Road and starts trying to get into somebody's house, right? And so the officer throws these people in his car. They run up there. They get another officer involved. Long story short, they were able to figure it out and get this guy to a hospital with the help he needed, right? Thank goodness nobody got hurt in that situation, but the officer was able to learn, okay, maybe I need to do some stuff differently when I'm planning this stuff, right? So then another example of something that went well is I can tell you that we've had in a short time, I'm only talking about a couple months here, that we've done the soft rollout of this. There have been 5 times that our officer and the clinician have been able to talk to somebody who normally we would take into custody. And that custody nowadays is lasting more often than not 72 hours. So if you can imagine having an officer sitting with somebody who's in a mental health crisis in a hospital bed for 3 days. 3 days, right? That's what we're trying to avoid. So my point is, they've gone 5 times in the short amount of time they've been doing this. They've been able to deal with a person who would normally be ECO'd, emergency custody, and refer them to some other resource, take them somewhere else other than a hospital, not in custody, but voluntarily, which is exactly what we need to do. It's a really, really tough system right now. It's very, very difficult once we get involved for people to get quick help. But that's what we're trying to do, and that's why, with the help of partners across agencies, across disciplines, in the community in general, the more people know about things, the better we're off, so that we don't get to that point, right? Okay, so that was a lot. Sorry, I know I keep saying
that is
that's
great.
good.
That's what
That
we're
is good.
needing. We're needing all hands on deck, right? And so that's what this program is, or not program, but that's what this call is doing. And so I hopefully it'll go across more agencies as time goes on. But I think it's absolutely wonderful. I commend you all for that. Any other questions about?
How are you promoting the 988 number? Because today is my first time hearing about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that. I think July or August is when it is an official deal. They've been kind of slow rolling it and making sure, because if okay, so here's a bit of a wrinkle that we're trying to work out. If I have a North Carolina cell phone number, right, an area code, and I dial 988, that's going to go to the call center in North Carolina, okay? And so those folks are well equipped to deal with me on the phone, but if they need to send resources right now, they're going to have to try to figure out where I am, right? So that's one of the things that they're trying to work out as we go through this. There are some public information spots and things like that have rolled out, but it hasn't been really pushed hard. And I know that when we get ready to kind of go online with our market alert, that we'll do all kinds of stuff through our social media, through the different the cable television stations that we have access to, Access TV, right? But it'll be a widespread thing for mental health in general. The Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services is kind of running that, and it's a national effort as well. But it's a good question. To my knowledge, it hasn't really been pushed hard, but it's getting ready to go like live, 100% kind of thing.
That's kind of the same, what you're saying, with the major saying, so with the programs, with the 988 from the Department of Behavioral Health and Health Services, they have companies. So when you call it 988, and the first thing is verbal de-escalation through the telephone. And the second thing is, maybe a mobile crisis unit, you come out, talk to the persons, and some of y'all seen them go into hotels, they go into stays to stabilize them. And then from mobile, then they go to what we call community stay. And then that's about up to 7 days. And then after community stay, hopefully they stabilize. If not, then they can get mental health skill building, or they can go into residential. And that's kind of how that process goes without that person, ideally getting locked up, they would get the mental health services versus anything escalating their behavior to where it'd be warranted for them to get locked up.
So just those levels of care,
Yes.
and trying to stop it at the level. And this is a great example of where social media is going to be a really, really big thing and a really positive thing. Kind of get it out there. Any questions about that before I go to?
The question I have is about manning. It seems like it's a big lift. Once it goes live, there's going to be more people calling because now we know about it. Are you going to be equipped to handle the amount of volume? And how are you addressing that? Are y'all actively recruiting more mental health professionals? If so, how can they reach you if they need to say, hey, I'm willing to be a part of that team? You can just kind of talk to us about that.
Yeah, that is a good question. I am currently sitting on one of the subcommittees. The governor, if you're familiar, established a program and an effort called Right Help Right Now, related to every aspect of mental health across the system. And I'm sitting on one of the subcommittees. And one of the focus efforts is how to bring more professionals to the workforce to help answer the calls, to help be the mobile responders, right? Because through the pandemic, that's one thing we didn't talk about, is our mental health professionals saw a huge decrease in their numbers, huge. And like, for instance, Central State Hospital, there are bed of last resort. They are supposed, like, if private hospitals won't take somebody that we have, they have to by law. But what they're telling us right now, and for years now, they've said, okay, yeah, I know we have to, but we'll call you when we can. Right? And that's why we sit on somebody for 1, 2, 3 days, right? And the reason that is because they all quit from Central State. They quit from Commonwealth Center for Children or Adolescents, I think it's called, the one up in Stanley. So that's a big issue. But there's a big push to say, and as part of the governor's task force, it's also part of Marcus Alert. Now, so for instance, if somebody from Chesterfield calls 988, it's not ringing to our emergency communication center. It's ringing to the call center in Richmond. Okay, those folks are stood up pretty well. But just like anything, it kind of ebbs and flows. But that's a really good question that I know that they are anticipating more calls for service to the 988. I know I will tell you that our emergency communication center is expecting, and our CSB is expecting fewer because of 988, right? And if Marcus Alert works well, then all those level 1 and 2 calls will go to 988, right? And we'll get kind of handled there. And then the 3s and 4s, we will still do what we would normally do. But it's not a concern that's falling on deaf ears. It is something that we are aware of. But to my knowledge, I have maybe every other week I have a meeting with our partners in Richmond and the call center folks. They haven't said anything about staffing issues. Now, once it really gets in gear, right, and 988 starts to be a thing, maybe they will, have some more opportunity for growth. But I don't know of any shortages that we have along those lines. And I can tell you that here in Chesterfield, for you Chesterfield folks, if we all are, our crisis team is finally fully staffed. It took them a couple of years to get there, but we're fully staffed. They had almost 100% turnover in the last 18 months. That's big. But now we're fully staffed. We got 4 clinicians who are on board to say, yep, we want to be the co-responding folks. We want to go out there and help people face to face. So we're really excited about where we're headed in Chesterfield. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Is there a way to find out more information about the 988 or register? Because I work in the state of Virginia, and a lot of our agencies are wanting information about how to handle employees in crisis. So, employees are dealing with a gamut of issues in daily life, and so they also are trying to figure out the difference between someone who's having a crisis and not wanting to just necessarily call 911. That's an embarrassment for the employee in the workplace. And so Is there a way to kind of tap in to get this information, to maybe use that as a resource?
Yeah, I think so. Kelly Freed is the director of our mental health support services. She put together a PowerPoint. We partner a lot on some different things. Do we all have like shared email with everybody in here?
We'll get it set up.
Okay. What I can do is I'll send a PowerPoint presentation to Kim, and then Kim can get it to whoever needs it. Speaking about Mark's Alert and 988 and kind of how that's coming together. That'd be okay?
I'm learning that mental health professionals have a mental health issue. What protocols are in place in each one of your respective fields or your basic location are in place to help those who are supposed to help those who need help?
Well, in private practice, there's really no protocol. You have to take care of yourself. You have to make sure that you're okay. So you have to find ways to, whether that's working out, whether that's nutrition, whether that's taking a vacation, whether that's getting you a therapist. Because if I was to tell you that, those things don't impact me, then I'd be telling you a lie, because they do impact. I had a young man a few weeks ago. There was a football player of mine. He got shot and killed. Had another young man a couple of days ago, and Henrico that played for me, they got shot. So it does affect you. So you got to find a way to take care of yourself. If you are like at Virginia State or somewhere, then you have employment assistance program, EAP, where you can call and get referrals and get help, and they'll provide some counseling services for you. But it's the same thing. A person has to take that step and realize that they need help, because with all the education, with all the things you've been through, you're still human, and things do affect you. And he kind of said something. Major kind of said something earlier. When you're doing your job, you're doing it with your mind. When you're dealing with people you love, you're dealing with your heart. And when you're dealing with your heart, you don't always make the right decisions. You make emotional decisions. So you got to make sure that you take care of yourself. And so nutrition, exercising, working out. We got at Virginia State now. In a lot of places you have what we call mental health days. So you got to take a mental health day and take care of yourself on that mental health day. Take care of yourself.
I'm going to jump in on that. I mean, we recommend too that just because you are a mental health professional does not mean that you don't need services yourself. And so we recommend that everybody get a therapist. If you can have somebody to talk to, that's your safe space. And a therapist doesn't have to be, a professional with a have a degree. Your therapist may be your best friend. It may be someone that you can talk to that's your safe space to say, I'm not okay today. I'm needing some additional support. And they're starting to develop support groups actually for counselors. So that's been something that I've seen an increase in, and that's good when you have someone who kind of get all the therapists together and kind of have conversations. But it's needed. It's needed. Yes.
I wanted to also add to that point, just the power of debriefing in itself. Just as an average person, I know for the professionals as well, but just what are some tips and things? I know some basic tips. I learned this from working with the YWCA and working with children and things like that. And they were just saying anytime that you work in high stress situations that just the power of debriefing, and that's doing things that'll kind of help get you back to your core and your baseline. Because even with social media and things like that, I think as a people, we are overly stimulated, and just knowing your balance and knowing what you can and can't take, and just those tips and tricks that are in place to debrief. And it could be a daily habit as well, just whether that's breathing like the 5, 4, 2, 1, or just breathing down, or exercising, or certain foods. So what are some tips or anything that y'all have experience with that any one of us could do as like a debriefing habit?
Oh, man. That's such a great question, right? So I think it's a very personal question too, right? Folks need different things to get back to their base. Some folks need solitude and quiet. Some folks need to move their bodies. Some folks need to talk about it with somebody. Some folks need to put it all in a journal and burn that journal at the end of it, right? So it's all about that journey of knowing yourself, but also trying to do that in community, right? Because you have coworkers, you have friends, you have family, developing that community that you can, when all your other tools that you tried have failed, and you're like, look, we have to talk. I have got to tell somebody all this stuff that happened to me at work today. It is about developing that self, getting that plan ahead of time, right? When you are up to here in the water, it is not the time to ask for a swimming lesson, right? But that's not to say that, hey, there's never going to be a perfect time, right? We have to start getting those tools a little bit here, a little bit there. Let me learn some breathing techniques. Let me see what it feels like if I journaled everything today, let me see what it feels like if I take a walk between clients. Just schedule in that break time, for whether it be a walk or whether it be for just nothing, right? Because it's such a personal plan, you have to know what works for you. So it's not going to be a one size fits all ever.
And you want to have tools. You don't want to have just one tool. It's not one tool is not going to work for every situation. And so there are apps too. Like, I'm not sure if you're all familiar with the Calm app. They have so many components in there that really is effective. I really like the Calm app. Another thing, just kind of getting that balance that you need, is boundaries. We have to know when we can't answer that phone at that time. I can call you back, but I may not answer it when it rings because I'm just not in a space, right? And we also really have to know that no is a complete sentence. It really is a complete sentence that we need to practice more often, right? So all of these things are that wellness of self, right? And getting that balance and things along those lines. So.
I'm going to address the elephant in the room. How do we deal with the stigmatism? We don't go to a therapist or a psychologist or psychiatrist.
Yeah, I've been over the since the COVID has started, that's one of the things that we have been definitely talking about, especially with Black males. And the machismo and the thinking that you're weak or you're not strong enough. And I tell people all the time that if you don't take care of yourself and you don't recognize what's going on with you, then you are no good for anybody else. So eventually everything around you is going to crumble and fall anyway. So I think that just getting out there talking to people, and you see more people talking to people, because we've seen an increase, especially in Black males. And that's kind of what I specialize in suicide rate. So we know that we need to talk to someone, and I assume that's for everybody, because people self-medicate, people isolate. And when you do that and internalize things, then it exacerbates the depressive feelings and those things. So I think the stigma is that these conversations that we have, it is okay. When you hear docs say that therapists have therapists, so I think once we begin to hear these things, and you got to start in our home, us talking to our children and making sure that they're okay, us talking to our spouses and making sure they're okay, us talking to our families and making sure that they're okay. And I think once we start communicating and doing those things, it's going to help. But it's always going to be, some stigma to it. But the more people that we can get to spearhead and go forward, the better we're going to be overall.
I think one of the things I saw as a shift, because my practice is totally telehealth, is that I'm starting to see people who would have never walked into the office. They would have never walked through that door that said, it's a therapist's office, but they can do it in the comfort of their home, or they can sit in the car. And then once they realize, and they kind of, for lack of a better way to describe it, buy in to, oh my gosh, this is helpful. Then I know some of the young Black males have kind of told their friends, it's okay to talk to somebody. I talk to somebody, they may not title what the person is, but I talk to somebody. And so I really think that has been helpful. It's almost like you get a trial run without having to kind of walk through that door, right? And so I think that with that, I don't know, you've seen an increase in that, but I think for those who are willing to come on the screen, then hopefully that kind of dispels some of the beliefs about mental health, And I think the generation that's coming up now, I think will go a little bit more. And I think maybe they're not as privy to some of the things that stopped us from going in the first place and some of the things that were happening. And so I think in that sense, they have they're a little bit further along. But I'm actually seeing those of us who are seasoned coming in more now as well. So hopefully, as we continue to get better, we'll tell somebody else that it's okay to do this, and we'll believe it by word of mouth, because we're certainly not going to necessarily believe the people who are out here unless you know somebody who's doing it.
I don't know if major branch say anything, but we have a support group as well in our.
Yeah, so we have one of two peer support groups that are accredited in the Commonwealth with our police department. So the question was, what do we do to help ourselves, right? So we have about 80 peer supporters spread out across the department, and we do regular debriefings on critical incidents and traumatic scenes. So, you know, traditionally, 30 years ago, when something bad happened, when I would come out, right? It's like, okay, you know, shake it off, get back in your car and go answer calls. And that's the way we did it, right? So we have not done a good job of taking care of ourselves. But, you know, if whatever profession you're in and you can learn, it's just, you have to address it. You have to talk about it. You can't just pretend it's not there. And you know, Dr. McCall mentioned the EAP, right? Whether you have a peer support group or whether you look at ways to look at mindfulness exercises or, you know, breathing or any number of coping techniques. But yeah, so for PD, in case you were wondering, we do have, and we have a wellness coordinator that we named a few years back, and her job is to address, you name it, whatever area of wellness. We have different programs for physical, spiritual, financial, mental, the whole deal. So it's important. Yes, ma'am.
So kind of going into your point, you know, like in the summer months, crime rates do go up, homicide rates go up within the central Richmond area. So how do we get more community traumatic debriefings? How do we get the community to come out, talk about it? You know, have you all come and actually sit down with more of the community and say, hey, I know this has happened in your community. I know this has happened in your school. Let's talk about it. How do we get more of that to be on more of a statewide initiative across the board? I know that's a big ask.
Yeah. I've got Chesterfield, right?
Like that.
That's a really good question. You mentioned schools too. We have SROs in schools. We have robust counseling Chesterfield schools, and we do those very well. I think is you know, we've had some recent situations with students hurting themselves or taking their own lives, and unfortunately, they have a protocol set up for what they do in schools. They flood them with counselors. Anybody that needs help with that, they follow up on a regular basis. Shoot, I missed the beginning of what you were asking.
Community traumatic.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was smiling about that. Just ask.
Okay.
Ask us. I'll come anywhere, right? And if I can't answer the question, we got all kinds of people who are subject matter experts to talk through that. And if it's not just a PD thing, then we got partners at our CSB, we got partners in private practice. Dr. McCall came through our Citizen Academy, our Chesterfield Police Citizen Academy, probably about 4 years ago now. And that's a way that you can learn about us and come together as a group and really connect in that way. But seriously, just ask, and we'll come meet you where you are. That's what we're all about.
We're going to pause here for a second. I have a number of questions that I do want to get to for the panel up here. First one is, how do you recommend we make discussions about or have discussions about mental health and mental wellness a part of our everyday lives with our families and friends? It seems to me that those discussions would make mental health discussions easier when a crisis occurs.
I think this happened. I think traditionally, you know, when I was coming up, you know, we sat down and had family dinners, you know, not all the time, but we definitely had Sunday dinners, you know, and you talk to people and, you know, kind of find out what's going on. And the second changes. And when you see your kids doing things that they wouldn't normally do, they're isolating, they're withdrawing, they're down, they're crying spells, or anybody in the house, you just got to begin to have those conversations, understand that mental health is real, you know. And so I think the biggest thing is just conversations with those we can control within our house. You know, that's what we can do, you know, just begin to have conversations.
I think this question kind of goes along with that. I have a relative that may act funny, could be on drugs. What should I do?
You ask, right? We show compassion. We always lead with compassion. We lead with kindness, and we ask questions. We show up. I noticed is like such a powerful 2 words you can string together, because everything after that, they know the first thing you did was you saw them. I noticed, right? Like I noticed you, I saw you. I noticed that you've been struggling. I noticed last time we were together at, grandma's for dinner, you were falling asleep. Are you not sleeping well? Like lead from that compassion place, not that, what are you doing, drugs, right? Right there, right? We go right to the heart. But if we lead with compassion, people want to tell us they're carrying a burden, it's heavy, and you just need to give them the right moment to let it out. You were falling asleep during dinner. What's going on? I noticed you seem really agitated today. What's happening? Can I help you? Like it's that just, you don't have to be a skilled mental health professional to just ask a few questions. Preferably not ones that are closed, which meaning are just yes or no questions, right? I do, what did you, something, I always have to leave my kids really lots of room, because if I say yes or no questions, that's all I'm getting, So it's the same thing when you're asking somebody, some questions about what's going on with them. It's just, don't swirl in your own head, right? Just be kind and ask the question. Just start it.
That's sometimes the hardest
They
part.
want to tell you. Trust, right? Like somebody, they've been carrying it. And if somebody has noticed them, what a lovely thing to be noticed by someone. That means someone cares about you. That feels really good. You're gonna want to tell them.
I see you.
I see you.
Say you're a mother and you have a grown daughter, and when the daughter goes through episodes, she calls the mother and goes off on her. So how does the mother help the child, especially when the child thinks that there's something wrong?
These are ages. How old's the child, right?
She said a grown daughter.
A grown daughter. Oh,
Over
okay.
18.
Yes, an adult. It sounds like.
Yes. Boundaries are hard to learn how to set, hard to hold, right? There's lots of great podcasts that talk about boundaries. There's lots of great information online. There's lots of great scripts. You can't start with a big boundary usually, because that's really shocking. I always like to start with little things, right? But it's as simple as if you're going to call me, we have to have a calm conversation. And if the conversation is not calm, I'm not going to continue the call. Right? Sometimes it's better to do that, not in the moment, right? After that last call, that's really a high intensity. When it's a calm moment, when you're enjoying each other's company in the same kind of way. Hey, last time we talked was pretty uncomfortable for me. I didn't feel good. I bet you didn't feel good either. If you call me again like that, we can't have that kind of conversation. I'm not gonna, setting it beforehand, and then holding can be so hard, especially when it's our kids. And, we want to hear them, we want to see them, we don't want to hang up on our kids. But sometimes for our own mental health, we have got to set and keep that boundary. Here's how you can talk to me when we're calm. Here's what you can do. I do want to help you. Here's the things I do want to help with when you're calm.
I think there's a lot of, I always talk to people, I think there's a lot of cultural differences in the way we handle things a lot of times. And, traditionally what ended up happening, if she called and fussing at that person, then that person gonna snap.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I think a lot of times within the Black community, we'll say, look, call your sister. Call your sister. And I keep talking to her, so you guys got to look at, what kind of works for you. I've been there too, and we quick to say, as Black parents, we quick to say, I don't know who you talking to. And the other thing I tell people too is that once you have a child or a person that has a diagnosis, there's a thing called prognosis. So you have to be educated on the symptomology that they exhibit, so you can be aware of when they having these downward spirals, how you can handle them also. So I always joke, I use a lot of what I call edutainment, right? So I believe that, you got to entertain and educate a person at the same time. So I use a lot of humor, right? Because that's when somebody asks, that's one way I protect myself. That's one way I protect myself. But I mean, these things become real. So you got to find out, what works. Some people you can be calm with. It's like having different children. Some children, my mom could be in the church choir, pastor, and she cursing in the choir. You can't say that, So we know. And they're gonna sit down, you know? So, you just gotta figure out how you can deal with that particular individual.
Are you gonna pour water or gas? The thing that's gonna come out of my mouth, the next thing will be water or gas. Right?
And Pastor, I didn't curse, I said.
Last question, and then we'll come back to you. Last question up here is, can you address the mental health challenges that you are seeing with older?
So, contrary to sort of what popular belief is, folks over the age of 75 are more likely to commit suicide than younger folks. Risk factors go up pretty exponentially, and they are actually the highest per capita for suicide deaths. So I think that's a big one, right there. We need to check. And then, of course, if you sit and think about it, it makes a lot of sense, right? We start to become isolated, financial circumstances. I thought I was going to have money enough for retirement. Now I've lived too long, right? Health challenges that feel insurmountable. There's a lot of things. So checking on older folks, I think, is a huge one.
When you lose all your friends, I've heard people
All
say,
your
I don't
friends.
have any friends, or your children move you away because they need to take care of you, but their lives are somewhere else, and you're going, now I don't have anybody here.
Outlive those that are close to you, because if you think about it, you're 95. You ain't picking up the phone calling a lot of 95 year olds. So I mean, it's kind of a scary thing for people. People are living long, but if you outliving all those, say for instance, I always say, if you was married to a person for 50 years and you 75 and they die, and then you live to 100, that's 25 years without that person. So the longer you live, it could have some effects on you, psychologically, physiologically, obviously with the decay theory. But you're not picking up the phone. I was looking at Facebook the other day. It was a lady 112 years old, and I'm like, wow. You're not picking up the phone and calling a lot of 112-year-old people.
We think about depression, and one of the signs of depression is like not being interested in the things you used to be interested in, right? But what if that gets taken away from you, not because you're not interested in it, but the reverse? And so a lot of those things happen in reverse as we get older. We really do need to keep our elderly folks closest to us, right? And check on them even more.
And I say this is the last thing. If you're 100 years old, you probably outlive your children, all your brothers and sisters. So I mean, it can put you in a state of depression. And if you're 100 and some years old and you're in a nursing home and nobody comes and visits you, I mean, it's a lot of factors that could elicit and admit that depression in you, which could lead to suicide.
Would you have access to legal means because you are more likely to prescribe medication? Right? Pain medicines, other things. So it's a lot of factors.
I hate
Yeah,
to
yeah,
wrap
yeah,
up.
one
We
question
are-
right here.
oh, okay. And then I
Two,
have one
that's
other
it.
question. Okay.
Okay, I work for Tuesday, and I work for now. These juveniles go through a lot of things, but they don't want to talk to people because they feel like people are judging them, or they just don't want to really tell what's going on. So they kind of talk to me more a little bit because I'm kind of close in age with them, but I don't know how to go about. I don't know what the right things to say, or so what advice would you give to someone who's not trained like you guys to, give advice, or how should I go about things? They always say, well, I can just drink and the problems go away, or I smoke and the problems go away. And I was like, that's not the right thing to do. But me saying it, of course, you don't want me to do it anyway. So how should I go about that?
I'll let them answer, but one thing I'll say is, when you clear, then now you have that problem, and the problems are still there because they haven't gone anywhere. So I have to think about that. But
So I think there's different levels of what I call therapeutic relationships. And therapeutic relationships don't necessarily mean that there's a licensed person like myself is working with them. Therapeutic relationship where you create an environment that's conducive for them to feel comfortable talking to you. And you may be the better person than me, relating to them, being empathetic to them, and just being there, listening, and those type of things definitely are helpful. But I will say, when you feel like things are exceeding your ability to cope with, then you refer them to somebody that can help them. And I think with your guidance, that they'll definitely follow your lead and get the help that they need.
And they know somebody that cares. I mean, at that point, if they're willing to talk to you.
So I had a child, he has substance issues. So he hasn't been around it, but he kind of makes it, like he takes things and makes it. So like he took a hand sanitizer bottle, put water in it and drunk it to make alcohol. So it's like, you take it away from them, trying to help, it's like they kind of find some way to kind of relax. And it's like, you don't want to kind of go over their heads knowing they don't want to talk to those people and you kind of ruin the relationship you have with them by saying something. So it's like,
So it becomes like this balance of health and safety, right? Like at some point you have a duty to kind of say, hey, this is like, this could be a life-threatening situation. I have got to, you know, it's just like when therapists come in. When you come in to see a therapist, they're like, here's the things that are protected when you're here, and here's what I have to tell on you if you come in and say to me, right? If it's a health and safety issue, you got to tell somebody. But there are lots of services available for teenagers if they're willing. You know, and sometimes it's a slow roll. Somebody who's going to say, hey, I trust this person. I'd love it if you talk to them. I feel like, you know, you and I have a good relationship and I know them. So like buy in by way of you, right? The other thing that I think a lot of people don't know we have now is we have a recovery high school. It's located here in Chesterfield, but it's available to all of the folks in what we consider to be District 1. So that's like everything around Richmond. So Richmond, Henrico, Dinwiddie, like all of this. So if you have a kiddo that is in high school that is struggling with substance use or who is trying to stay away from substances but is going into like the mouth of the devil every day, right? They can fill out an application and come see us in Chesterfield County. There are stipends, I believe, for transportation, so that can be helpful for the parents. But the staff there is amazing. So they have clinicians. They will help them get their high school diploma while they're there. They will graduate not from the Recovery Academy, but from the school they came from. So their diploma is not going to, you know, because we know there's stigma. It's unfortunate. I would love it if we could just be like, celebrate that Recovery Academy diploma, but they will get a diploma from their original school of origin. Great program. Just went through its first year, graduated 2 students. The graduation was amazing. You see these bright young folks got this whole world ahead of them, and they just really need a safe and stable place to be for a little bit, right? So there are options for folks who are struggling. I'd say you're teetering into that safety issue though, if they're consuming, you know, hand sanitizer, which has a really high alcohol content, and they're engaged, you know, they're at an age where they're just engaging in risky behavior. That's what we do when we're teenagers. We reach the things that are available to us. So yeah, I think also, sorry, one more thing I'll plug. We have a thing in Chesterfield called mental health first aid. We have a program that's for adults, adult-based, not for adults, but like for helping other adults. But we also have one that's focused on helping teens. So it's mental health first aid for teenagers. So that might be something you could do to kind of up your skill level. And it's available. You can check it out online and then see how you can sign up. But that might be something that'll be helpful for you.
Last question.
Yeah, it's not really a question, this is more of a question. I think one of the things is just observation and understanding what you are observing. So the first question is, can we just have a simple website that folks can go to, learn about symptoms and signs? Really kind of educate on what they're looking at or observing something. And number 2, I'm just wondering if we see a change in policies that are being set to help the community become better and help professionals be better or do better. And so if one of you can share that would help.
I think the first part is that there's a lot of resources out there via internet. You go in certain doctor's office, you come to my office, there's literature there to tell you the different signs and symptoms that you exhibit for certain disorders. I think the second part is where the problem is. I think that a lot of us, we don't go out and vote. We're not vocal in our communities. We think that because it's not happened to us, we don't care until it happened to somebody that we care about. And I think we got to get involved and we got to make that movement, and it's going to start with things here. And we got to go to our legislators. We got to, like with when the young man got killed on the side of the road out there, his sister, you know, is the one that went and fought for the act. So I think that it's got to start there. It's going to take a village. You know, it's going to take a village.
And that leads to my final question. That's it.
Can I just say, so I work for the Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services. And it wasn't until I started working for them that I went to their website, that I didn't know their website existed, and saw all this amazing information. So what I would say is that we also look at our county websites, the Department of Health websites. There's a ton of information out there that, like he said, like the doctor said, you just don't know it's there. You don't need it. So if you look before you need it, then you'll know it's there.
Right. And a lot of our websites, for those of us who have practices, have blogs. And we have, a drop-down list of the different, disorders or things like that people may struggle with. So, I mean, it's a lot of information. I think it was more like, could it be at one place? You're not going to really find, you could find it in one place, but it's so many places that you would, have to look for the information. But if you put in a diagnosis, then a lot of times those organizations will come up anyway, if you're looking at something. I have one final question for the panel. Thank you all so much for being here. And we kind of alluded to it at the end, which is, how can our community and faith-based organizations help with the mental health crisis? That's the first part. And what can we do as churches and civic organizations and as a community as a whole to come together to continue to move us in the right direction? And then there's a loaded question, but just kind of,
You got 3 minutes.
I think all of us are here. So, from one of those, fits in one of those categories, what can we all do to kind of not let it stop here in this time?
I use the word pollinator a lot. Like, you learned something here today, right? One thing at least that you could probably go and tell 5 people. That's an easy way to affect some change and get, news out to a community. I think if you are not a member of this church, then you should go back to your faith-based organization or your civic organization. You should tell them how good this was. It was pretty good. You should tell them how good this is, and you want to run one, and how can they do that? I think if you, again, are from another church and you want to talk about how you heard the pastor come up here and say that we were going to talk about it, and we're going to keep talking about it, that's great too, right? With a little pressure on folks to kind of shift the paradigm a little bit. And everything that we just did, that we talked about today, asking questions, keep talking about it, talk about your own mental health, ask people how they're doing. You start doing it, someone else is going to start doing it. Your kids are going to do it because you've modeled it for them now. And it just begins to be a bigger change, right? You're just pollinating that out.
All right. Well, this, and another thing is, this won't be the last one, I hope. This will not be the last time we do this. So that will also kind of keep it going. So I know we are out of time. We could keep going forever, but we're not. So thank you. And like you, we all learn lots of things. We talk about the therapists and things like that. We learn things when we get together like this as well. So it's always good for all of us to have an opportunity to be around one another. So again, thank you for that. And we're going to have closing remarks.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Annette McFarlane, First Vice President for the Chesterfield Alumnae Chapter. I just can't wait for the second one. I don't know about y'all, but I just stay tuned because it is coming.
Going back tomorrow?
Tomorrow, but just stay tuned. On behalf of the Chesterfield Alumnae Chapter, I would like to thank each of you for attending today. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and together, by sponsoring this program, we help to raise awareness to mental health. To the Spring Creek Baptist Church, Dr. Cooper and the Spring Creek family, thank you so much for partnering with us. Thank you for helping us to make this program come to pass, as it was one of the more needed programs for the community. May God continue to bless you in all of your good works as you continue to serve the community with programs such as the one here today. Thank you for opening the doors and just letting us come in. To the panelists, Dr. McCall, Major Brad Badgerow, did I say your name right? Badgerow? And Lauren, I just heard your name so much on the call, and I feel like I really just know you. We are very grateful to be in the presence of all of this knowledge and expertise that was communicated this evening. Thank you so much. Although we cannot pay you, but we have a little small something, a little small token of our appreciation. We would like to present to each one of you today. Here's yours. And thank you very much. Last but not least, President McQueen at the Chesterfield Alumni chapter. My chapter, will you all stand? The Chesterfield Alumni chapter. This is our chapter that's a representative, not everybody, but a representation up here today. Thank you, Dr. for trusting us to bring this program on. Last but not least, the subcommittee. Sarah Kimberly Conley, Marla Burgess, where's Ayana? Please stand. This is the subcommittee. With myself, we worked on this to bring this program. And to the community, thank you for just showing up. Thank you for, and just continue to support Chesterfield Alumni and the programs that we do in the community. And God bless you and have a great day. I will now turn it back over to Dr. Cooper for closing.
Again, let's give everybody a round of applause. One thing I want to avoid everyone. You heard. You've been listening. As a people of faith, the next best thing that you can do until you can do something else is to take all of those concerns and lift it up to the one that we know about. Mm-hmm. Right? And the best thing about that is you don't have to know the details. Because the God I serve knows the details. Yeah. So you can, some prayer is, this took place at Spring Creek with the Chesterfield Alumnae chapter, the Theta Sorority. Lord, continue on strengthening them that it can even expand even more. Something real simple, right? Or Lord, all the folk who are dealing with issues, give them strength. Be there for them. Show me how I can make a difference. Right? If you do that, I'm one of those people, I really do believe you'll start hearing something a little bit different. You'll start seeing some things a little bit different. So I really do beseech each one of you to go ahead and give that a shot. Lastly, do know that Spring Creek is here in any and every way that we can be. And on my side, this won't be the last time, right? Because it can't be the last time because too many folk we are losing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? It's just a sad situation. I don't personally think that anything can ever take place in the community unless the church should be the first part. Mm-hmm. So that's just where I am theologically. That's where I am practically. So it's important that we just do our part. Again, Spring Creek is going to speak up. Spring Creek is going to be advocates. Spring Creek is going to be an information place where we can come get everything that we need. We're going to be a place that look at each and every one of you and all who come as an individual made in the image of God and has value in spite of. Okay? And if you're feeling any kind of way, don't be afraid to make a phone call. Say something. I just say something. Okay? So I just want to put that out there. And then we just can't end without prayer. Right. Now you're in church and just that's right. You're in church and you just leave out like it's just normal. It's just not normal. Right. So we're gonna stand. I'm going to ask Deacon Robin if she come and lead us out in prayer. Spring Creek Baptist Church has been around for 146 years, and Deacon Robin is our first chairperson of Daphne. We thank God for her support and her presence here. She will be.
Yes, thank you all for coming, thank you panelists, and yes, we will have to do this again. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, from which all blessings flow, we thank you, we praise you. Thank you for putting this together, for allowing us to learn about mental health, that it's not taboo, that we can talk about it. Allow us to feed others what we've been fed today, to have conversations with family, with friends. It's the little things, God, to smile at our neighbors, to get things started, Lord. We ask that you bless each and every one of these individuals that are here tonight. Please continue to bless them, give them what they need to do better, to be better. We praise you, we honor you, we lift you up. Let us all say amen. Amen.
Vegan Robin. Vegan Robin. Hey, lady.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hey.